He a tycoon, haunted by the remorse of abandoning his first love. She, Sophia, that former flame, now pregnant and alone. Fate brings them back together. Seeing her pain, Dominic offers to be the baby's father. Sophia, I know I messed up in the past, but I never stopped loving you. And now I won't abandon you. I want to be this child's father if you'll let me. I want to give you the home and the love you deserve. Get ready for a twist where a tycoon steps up to paternity for love and redemption. But society in the past will try to destroy this new. Family and true love will prove that family is built with care and acceptance. Watch this story to the end. You will be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this. Continuing, the March rain fell relentlessly on New York City as Sarah Walker stepped off the bus on Fifth Avenue, shielding her 7-month belly with her soaked purse. Each step was an effort, each breath a painful reminder of how her life had fallen apart in a few months. The rented apartment had been lost the week before, and she carried all she owned in a small suitcase and a torn plastic bag. At 38, Sarah maintained her dignity even in the most adverse circumstances. Her brown hair was tied in a simple bun, and despite the cheap dress and worn sandals, there was something in her bearing that betrayed a woman who had known better days. The father of her baby had disappeared as soon as he learned of the pregnancy, taking with him the savings she had entrusted to him and leaving only empty promises and overdue bills. She looked at the address scribbled on the wet paper: Hope House, a shelter for mothers in vulnerable situations. It was her last option, and the shame burned more than the cold rain. Sarah took a deep breath, caressed her belly and murmured to the baby, "We'll be okay, honey. Mommy will figure it out." A few blocks away, on the top floor of a mirrored skyscraper, Dominic Albright signed contracts that moved millions. At 40, he had built a tech empire that spanned the country, and his philanthropic foundation was a benchmark in social projects. Dressed in an impeccable Italian suit, dark hair slightly graying at the temples, Dominic had the bearing of someone born to command, but behind the success and recognition lived a tormented man. 15 years ago, under family pressure and blinded by ambition, he had abandoned Sarah without explanation, choosing an arranged marriage that promised to expand the business. The bitter divorce came years later when he realized he had traded true love for a cold corporate alliance. Since then, no woman had managed to fill the void that Sarah had left. "Mr. Albright," the secretary interrupted his thoughts. "The visit to Hope House is scheduled for 3 o'clock. Director Marcia is waiting." Dominic nodded. It was the inauguration of the shelter's new wing, sponsored by his foundation. These visits were part of his philanthropic routine, but also a way to seek purpose in a life that, despite all the wealth, seemed hollow. The Institute was in a renovated building in downtown. When Dominic arrived, accompanied by his team and some journalists, Director Marcia greeted him with enthusiasm, explaining the support programs for mothers in difficulty. They toured the facilities, simple but dignified dormitories, cafeteria, recreation room, nursery. "We have a considerable waiting list," Marcia explained as they walked down the hall. "Many women come to us in desperate situations." That's when Dominic saw her. Sarah was sitting in an uncomfortable chair in the reception area, her suitcase at her feet, her hands clasped over her prominent belly. She was wet from the rain, visibly exhausted, but kept her head held high with a dignity that he immediately recognized. The world stopped. Dominic's heart raced, and for a moment he forgot where he was, who was with him, all the protocol of the visit. Sarah, his Sarah, pregnant, alone, visibly in trouble. She looked up and saw him. The shock was mutual and devastating. Her eyes widened, and Dominic saw there all the pain he had caused, mixed with the shame of the current situation. Sarah tried to get up quickly, but the heavy belly unbalanced her. "Sarah?" Dominic's voice came out in an incredulous whisper. Director Marcia stopped talking, noticing the tension in the air. The journalist began to take an interest in the unusual situation. Sarah managed to stand up, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Dominic," she said softly, her voice trembling. I didn't know you." "You know each other?" Marcia asked, confused. Dominic couldn't take his eyes off Sarah. In his mind, the pieces were quickly falling into place. She was there asking for help, pregnant, clearly abandoned. The guilt and pain of seeing her in that state hit him like a punch to the stomach. We've known each other for many years," he managed to say, still in shock. Sarah lowered her eyes, mortified. The last thing she wanted was to meet the man who had broken her heart at the most vulnerable moment of her life. "I need to go," she murmured, picking up the suitcase. "No." The word came out of Dominic with more force than he intended. Everyone in the reception area was watching them now. "Sarah, please don't go." She stared at him, and in that look he saw 15 years of pain, loneliness, and now despair. "What do you want from me, Dominic? Isn't it enough that you broke me once?" The question echoed through the tense silence of the reception area, and Dominic knew that his life had changed forever in that instant. The heavy silence of the reception was broken by Dominic's firm voice. "Marcia, please, could you give us a moment alone?" The director hesitated, looking between the two, but nodded and discreetly led the team and journalists away. Sarah remained standing, holding the handle of the suitcase tightly, the knuckles of her fingers white. The smell of rain and hospital disinfectant hung in the air. "Sarah, for God's sake, let me explain." Dominic took a step towards her, but Sarah recoiled. "Explain what? How you abandoned me on the eve of our wedding to marry your partner's daughter? How I found out in the newspapers that you had chosen to expand your business instead of—" Her voice failed, and she took a deep breath, struggling to maintain her composure. Dominic felt each word like a blade. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I was young, pressured by my family, by the company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. My father said it was the only way to save everything, that you would understand later." "Understand?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I waited for you, Dominic. I waited for you to show up, to give an explanation, anything, but you simply disappeared from my life as if I had never existed." He watched her, noticing every detail, how she instinctively protected her belly, how her hands trembled slightly, how despite all the bitterness, there was still a spark of that vibrant woman he had loved. "And now you're here, alone, and—" His voice broke as he saw the reality of the situation. "Pregnant and with nowhere to go," Sarah completed, raising her chin defiantly. "Yes, Dominic, this is the woman you abandoned, who was once again abandoned by a man who promised to take care of her." Fury grew in Dominic's chest, not against her, but against the man who had left her in that situation. "Who was it? Who did this to you?" "That's none of your business." Sarah headed to the reception desk, where the clerk waited nervously. "Please, I would like to talk about a vacancy at the shelter." Dominic followed her. "Sarah, you don't need this. I can..." "Can what?" She turned abruptly to face him. "Save me? Like last time?" The irony in her voice was cutting. "I don't need your charity, Dominic Albright." The receptionist looked uncomfortably between the two. "Ms. Walker, as I explained, our waiting list is full. Maybe in a few weeks." "A few weeks?" Sarah paled. "But I have nowhere to go tonight." Dominic couldn't contain himself. "This is unacceptable, Marcia!" His voice echoed through the hallway, bringing the director back running. "Yes, Mr. Albright. Why can't this woman be accommodated immediately?" Do you have vacancies? Marcia looked embarrassed. Sir, our facilities are at capacity. We follow a strict waiting list to be fair to everyone. Then make an exception, Dominic said coldly, his voice taking on the commanding tone he used in board meetings. No, Sarah interrupted him firmly. I don't want special treatment because of you. I don't want anything that comes from you. The tension was palpable. Dominic studied her, seeing the familiar stubbornness in her eyes, but also the despair she was trying to hide. So what are you going to do? Sleep on the street? If I have to. But her voice wavered, and she instinctively caressed her belly. With my grandchild. The question escaped before he could stop himself. Sarah stared at him, shocked. It's not your grandchild, Dominic. You lost the right to use that word when you abandoned me. The pain in Dominic's chest was physical. He watched Sarah pick up her suitcase, head to the door with determined but clearly exhausted steps. The rain had intensified outside, and through the glass he could see the storm that awaited her. Sarah, please, at least let me take you to a hotel until you find another place. She stopped at the door without turning around. Why, Dominic? Why now? Where were you when I really needed you? Before he could answer, Sarah went out into the torrential rain. Dominic followed her to the sidewalk, soaking his expensive suit. Sarah! She was standing in the rain, clearly not knowing where to go. The suitcase was too heavy, the belly too big, and there were no taxis in sight. Dominic approached slowly. You don't have to accept my help for me, he said softly, but accept it for your baby. A dry night, a hot meal. It's the least any child deserves. Sarah closed her eyes, the rainwater mixing with the tears on her face. When she opened them, there was a painful resignation there. One night, just one night, and tomorrow I'm leaving. Dominic nodded, relieved, and gently picked up her suitcase. As they headed to the car, his phone rang. It was Marcus, his chief assistant. Dominic, we have a problem. Those journalists who were with you at the Institute, they photographed everything. A picture of you with a pregnant woman is circulating on social media with speculations about who she is. The press office is in a panic. Dominic looked at Sarah getting into his car, unaware of the storm that was approaching. Leave it to me, Marcus. But when he hung up, he knew he had crossed a line he couldn't turn back. In 24 hours, all of New York would be speculating about the identity of the mysterious woman who made the city's most powerful tycoon run after her in the rain. Dominic's mansion in Greenwich was everything Sarah had imagined and feared at the same time. As the car passed through the electronic gates, she observed the perfectly manicured gardens, the modern and imposing architecture, the windows that reflected the city lights. It was a world she had known briefly 15 years ago, when she still believed she would be part of it. You don't need to impress me, she said softly, as he stopped in front of the main entrance. I'm not trying to impress anyone. Dominic turned off the engine and stared at her. This is my home, Sarah, and for tonight it's yours too. The housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, a 60-year-old lady with a maternal smile, greeted them at the door. If she was surprised to see Dominic arriving soaked with a pregnant woman, she didn't show it. Mrs. Davis, this is Sarah. She will stay in the guest room on the east wing. Please provide dry clothes and a meal. Of course, Mr. Albright. Mrs. Davis addressed Sarah with genuine kindness. Ma'am, we'll take care of you. You need a hot bath and food. Sarah hesitated at the entrance to the main hall, feeling out of place among the expensive furniture and artwork. I shouldn't be here. Why not? Dominic had taken off his wet jacket and was watching her. Even exhausted and in simple clothes, she still had that presence that had fascinated him years ago. This house has always been too big for one person. 2 hours later, Sarah came down to dinner wearing a silk robe that Dominic had asked Mrs. Davis to provide. Her hair was loose and damp from the bath, and she looked slightly less tense. He was waiting for her in the dining room, already wearing casual clothes. "Better?" he asked. "Much." Sarah sat down at the table, aware of the distance between them. At the table for 12 people. "Thank you, I needed that." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the unspoken years hanging between them. It was Sarah who finally broke the silence. "Why did you never remarry? After the divorce, I mean." Dominic paused with his fork in the air. "How do you know I got divorced?" "Dominic, you're one of the richest men in America. Your personal life becomes news." Sarah took a sip of water. "But you've always been discreet. I've never seen pictures of you with other women in the newspapers." "Because there weren't other women. Not really." The words came out more honest than he intended. Sarah stared at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "That isn't true." "Yes, it is." Dominic put down his fork and leaned forward. "You want to know why I never remarried, Sarah? Because none of them were you. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face that morning when you found out in the newspaper that I had married someone else." The silence that followed was laden with pain. Sarah unconsciously caressed her belly, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Dominic. "And you?" he asked softly. "The baby's father. Who is he?" Sarah stiffened. "I already said that's none of your business." "Sarah, you're in my house carrying a child whose father abandoned her. I think I have the right to know at least his name. Why? So you can use your power and money to haunt him, to do what you should have done years ago?" The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "Maybe." The honest answer caught her off guard. Sarah studied him, seeing the controlled fury in his eyes. "Ryan Miller, was an architect. I met him 8 months ago at an art exhibition. He seemed different from the other men I had met. Kind, interested in who I really was, not just my appearance." Dominic felt a pang of jealousy that surprised him. "And then he convinced me to invest my savings in a project of his. Said it was to build a future together." Sarah laughed bitterly. "When I found out I was pregnant and told him, Ryan disappeared. Took the money, cancelled the project, changed his phone, as if I were just another fool he had cheated." "Son of a bitch," Dominic muttered under his breath. "At least he was honest about who he was in the end. Didn't spend 5 years pretending to love me." Indeed, the comparison cut deep, and Dominic swallowed hard. They finished dinner in tense silence. When Sarah got up to go upstairs, Dominic followed her to the foot of the stairs. "Sarah, about that time, there are things you don't know. Things I never told you because they were..." He hesitated. "Were what, Dominic?" "Dangerous." The word came out as a whisper. "My father, he wasn't just pushing me to marry Helena because of business. There were other things at stake, people who could have hurt you if they knew what I really felt." Sarah turned completely to face him. "What are you talking about?" Dominic ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling with painful memories. "You remember what happened to my sister Carol 3 months before what should have been our wedding?" "Of course. The car accident." Sarah frowned. "But what does that have to do?" "It wasn't an accident." The confession came, so low that she almost didn't hear it. "Carol had discovered some irregularities in our father's companies. She was about to report them when she..." Sarah stepped down, approaching him. "Dominic, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that when you truly love someone, sometimes you have to hurt them to protect them." His eyes shone with unshed tears. "I'm saying that every day for the past 15 years, I've wondered if I made the right choice." And seeing you here, pregnant and alone, I guess the answer is no. Sarah went up the steps slowly, processing the revelation. At the bedroom door, she turned one last time. If that's true, Dominic, then you didn't abandon me for ambition. You abandoned me out of fear. Her voice was soft, but full of meaning. And I don't know which one hurts me more. The door closed gently, leaving Dominic alone with the weight of a secret he had kept for 15 years. The early morning brought an unsettling silence to the mansion. Dominic was in his office reviewing contracts he couldn't process when he heard a muffled scream coming from upstairs. He ran up the stairs, his heart racing. The door to Sarah's room was ajar, and he found her doubled over on the bed, holding her belly with both hands, her face contorted in pain. "Sarah, what's happening?" "I don't know," she gasped. "Pain, a lot of pain, and there's blood." Dominic saw the red spots on the sheet and felt panic take over. "We're going to the hospital, now." "I can't lose this baby, Dominic," Sarah grabbed his arm, her eyes full of tears. "He's all I have left." "You won't lose him," he said firmly, carrying her in his arms. "I won't let that happen." The drive to New York Presbyterian Hospital was an eternity of sirens and silent prayers. Dominic held Sarah's hand while the medical team examined her, his connections ensuring the best immediate care. "Partial placental abruption," explained Dr. Emily Carter, the most respected obstetrician in New York and a personal friend of Dominic. "It's not serious yet, but she needs absolute rest. Any additional stress can worsen the condition." "For how long?" asked Dominic. "Until the birth. 2 months of bed rest, constant monitoring." The doctor looked between the two. "She needs specialized care in a completely stress-free environment." Sarah was sedated in the private room, finally sleeping after hours of anguish. Dominic had refused to leave her side, still holding her hand when she woke up the next morning. "The baby," was her first word. "He's fine. You're both fine." Dominic caressed her hair. "But you need to stay on absolute bed rest." "I can't afford to pay for a private hospital, Dominic, let alone home nursing. You're not going to pay for anything." The determination in his voice was unwavering. "And you're going to stay in my house, under medical care. It's non-negotiable." Sarah tried to protest, but he interrupted her gently. "You said you didn't want to lose this baby. Then let me help you save him." Tears streamed down her face. "Why are you doing this? After all these years?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "I've always loved you, and now I have the chance to protect you the way I should have done 15 years ago." During the 3 days of hospitalization, Dominic didn't leave the hospital. He turned the room into an extension of his office, working on his laptop while Sarah rested, coordinating meetings by video conference, but always attentive to any change in her condition. It was on the second night that Elizabeth Caldwell appeared. His ex-wife entered the room like an elegant storm, wearing a fur coat, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her icy blue eyes fixed on Sarah. "So, this is the famous Sarah Walker," said Elizabeth, ignoring Dominic completely. "The woman who managed to make my ex-husband a joke in the newspapers." "Elizabeth, get out of here now." Dominic stood up, placing himself between her and Sarah. "Please, Dominic. 15 years of marriage gives me the right of knowing the woman who is destroying your reputation." Elizabeth walked around him, studying Sarah in the hospital bed. "So you're pregnant by another man and came after the tycoon to pay your bills. How convenient." Sarah tried to sit up, but Dominic gently stopped her. "Don't stress yourself. She's leaving." "I am leaving, yes, but not before making a few things clear." Elizabeth took an envelope from her purse. "These are pictures of you leaving the hospital early this morning, Dominic, and of this woman being carried by you. The press is speculating whether the baby is yours." "So what?" Dominic took the envelope but didn't open it. So what that your father may be dead, but his enemies aren't? Elizabeth smiled coldly. You don't think they're paying attention? That they don't know you found your old flame in a shelter? For single mothers, Dominic's blood ran cold. What are you implying? I'm saying that history repeats itself, darling. Carol died because she discovered Daddy's secrets. And now you're publicly exposing the woman who has always been your greatest weakness. Elizabeth headed to the door. Some favors your father owed haven't been paid yet, Dominic. And certain people know exactly where to hurt you. After Elizabeth left, Sarah held Dominic's hand tightly. What is she talking about? What enemies? What favors? Dominic looked at the photos scattered on the table. Images of him carrying Sarah, waiting in the hallway, holding her hand. In each photo, it was impossible to deny the intimacy, the care, the love. My father, he didn't build this empire just with honest work, Sarah. There were debts, deals with dangerous people. When he died, I thought I had managed to clean everything up, pay all the debts. But you didn't. Apparently not. Dominic caressed her face. Elizabeth is right about one thing. You've always been my greatest weakness. And now, with these photos circulating, everyone knows it. That same night, Dominic's cell phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Hello, Dominic. It's been a while. The voice was rough with a southern drawl. Saw the pictures in the papers. What a beautiful woman. Pregnant too. Who is this? Someone who knew your father very well, and who is eager to meet your new family. The laugh was sinister. We'll meet tomorrow, alone, or maybe I'll have to pay a visit to that Sarah Walker. The call dropped, leaving Dominic with the terrible certainty that in saving Sarah, he had just put her in mortal danger. Sarah was settled in the master suite of the mansion, transformed into an improvised hospital room. A private nurse monitored her vital signs hourly, and Dominic had cancelled all business trips to stay close. 2 weeks had passed since the phone threat, and he had hired a discreet security team to watch over the property. What he didn't expect was that the real threat would come from within his own company. Marcus, his trusted assistant for 10 years, entered the office with a grave expression. Dominic, we need to talk. We have a serious problem. Go ahead. The company's quarterly audit revealed some financial irregularities. Marcus placed a folder on the desk. Unauthorized transfers, offshore accounts that are not on the official records. And there's more. They found documents suggesting that your father may have laundered money for the Mexican drug cartel back in the 90s. Dominic felt the floor collapse. That's impossible. I thought the same thing, but the documents are authentic, Dominic. And worse, someone leaked this information to the district attorney. A formal investigation will begin next week. Who had access to these documents? Only 3 people in the company, me, you, and Marcus hesitated, and Robert Vasco. Robert, the chief financial officer whom Dominic had promoted the previous year, despite the reservations of some board members. An ambitious man who always questioned Dominic's decisions and made comments about him losing focus since Sarah appeared in his life. Where is he now? Meeting with some members of the board, they requested an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Dominic went up to see Sarah before the meeting. She was reading a book, one hand resting on her 8-month belly. How are you two doing today? He asked, kissing her forehead. Impatient. This baby is kicking so much that I think he wants to come out soon. Sarah smiled, but her smile disappeared when she saw his expression. What's wrong? Problems at the company. Nothing I can't handle. Dominic. Sarah took his hand. After everything we've been through, don't lie to me. He sat on the edge of the bed and told her everything. The audit, the documents, the impending investigation. Sarah listened in silence, processing each word. And you think this Robert is behind it? I'm sure of it. The question is why? Dominic caressed her hair. Maybe it's just ambition, or maybe it's something more. The board meeting was a massacre. Robert had prepared the ground carefully, presenting evidence of Dominic's emotional instability, questioning his recent decisions and suggesting that his controversial relationship was compromising his business judgment. Gentlemen, Robert addressed the other board members, we all know that Dominic has been distracted lately. A pregnant woman by another man living in his house, speculation in the press about paternity, and now this investigation. The company needs stable leadership. What are you suggesting exactly? Dominic asked coldly. I'm suggesting that you temporarily step down from the presidency until these issues are resolved. For the good of the company and all employees. The vote was tight but sufficient. Dominic was suspended from his duties indefinitely, with Robert assuming the interim presidency. When he arrived home, he found Sarah trying to get up alone, clearly agitated. What are you doing? You should be resting. I saw it on the news, Dominic. They said you were removed, that there is an investigation into money laundering. She stared at him, tears in her eyes. Is it true? Was your father involved with criminals? Dominic helped her to sit down again. I don't know, Sarah. Honestly, I don't know. My father died when I was 25. If he did these things, I never knew. But you suspected. That's why you pushed me away 15 years ago. That's why your sister, Carol, discovered something and died for it. Yes, the admission hurt physically. And now I'm seeing history repeat itself, only this time with you in the middle of the hurricane. That night the phone rang again, the same rough voice. Congratulations on the promotion, Dominic. Or should I say, ex-president. What do you want? $20 million by Friday. In exchange, the documents proving that you knew about your father's activities disappear forever. I didn't know anything. Doesn't matter. I have forged documents that prove otherwise. Your signature on contracts with our business group. Very convincing. The laugh was cruel. Oh, and Dominic, I saw that your little girlfriend is almost giving birth. It would be a shame if something happened to her before the baby is born. If you lay a finger on her. 20 million. Friday. Otherwise, the next headline will be about how the tycoon Dominic Albright not only inherited a criminal empire, but continued operating with the dirty money. And I'm sure the FBI will want to ask your new family some questions too. The call ended, and Dominic realized he was cornered. He didn't have 20 million available. His assets were frozen by the investigation. And even worse, Sarah and the baby were now at the center of a deadly game. He went up to the room and found her awake, waiting for him. It was him again, wasn't it? Sarah asked softly. Dominic nodded, unable to lie to her. How much do they want? Sarah. How much, Dominic? 20 million by Friday. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. And if you don't pay, they'll destroy everything that's left of my reputation, and they'll come after you. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the reality of the situation. Finally, Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him. Then we need to disappear before Friday. Sarah, you can't travel. The doctor said, I can't have this baby in a federal prison, Dominic, and that's what's going to happen if we stay here. She took his hands. You saved me once. Now let me help you save us. But they both knew there was nowhere to run. The net was closing in, and in 3 days, they would either pay the price demanded or lose everything, including their lives. Thursday arrived with a storm that mirrored the chaos in Dominic's life. Sarah had been having irregular contractions since dawn, and Dr. Carter had arrived to monitor her closely when the doorman announced unexpected visitors. FBI, search warrant. Dominic ran downstairs and found a dozen agents ransacking his house. Agent Ricardo Munoz, a 50-year-old man with a stern expression, presented the documents. Mr. Albright, there is evidence that you have knowledge of and active participation in money laundering operations through your companies. I need you to come with us to give a statement. My partner is in labor. I can't leave now. I'm sorry, but it's not optional. Munoz signaled to two agents, unless you prefer to be taken away in handcuffs in front of the cameras that are at the gates. Dominic looked out the window and saw the vans of the main television channels. Dozens of reporters and photographers crowded at the entrance to the mansion. Someone had leaked the operation to the press. "Dominic!" Sarah shouted from upstairs. "Something is wrong!" He ran upstairs, accompanied by the agents. Sarah was in bed, her face pale with pain, a pool of blood under her. Dr. Carter examined her quickly. "Labor has started, but there are complications. She needs emergency surgery now." "I'm going with her," Dominic said. "You're not." Munoz was inflexible. "You're under arrest, Albright. Your girlfriend is going to the hospital with a police escort." Sarah took Dominic's hand as the paramedics prepared her for the stretcher. "No matter what happens, I trust you. Did you hear me? I trust you." Those were the last words she managed to say before being taken away, and Dominic was escorted in the opposite direction. At the bureau, Robert Vasco was waiting with an expression of false concern. "I'm very sorry it has come to this, Dominic, but you forced our hand. You thought we wouldn't find out about Carol, about how she was blackmailing your father with the evidence of the criminal operations." Robert smiled coldly. "She didn't die because she discovered his crimes, Dominic. She died because she was trying to sell the information to us. Lies. Inconvenient truth. Carol wanted to leave the country with her American boyfriend, needed quick money. Contacted us offering the documents that would prove everything. Your father found out and, well, accidents happen." Dominic felt nauseous. "And you? How do you fit into this?" "I worked for the Mexico group for 10 years before being hired by your company. My mission was simple. Enter the organization, gain your trust, have access to the documents that Carol couldn't deliver." Robert stood up. "And it worked perfectly. You promoted me, gave me access to everything until I found out about your little fling. What does Sarah have to do with this?" "Sarah has nothing to do with it, but she became your weakness, and weaknesses can be exploited." Robert showed a series of photos. Sarah entering and leaving stores in recent days, shopping for the baby, always accompanied discreetly by security guards. Her every move has been monitored, every place she visited. We know she has a sister in Miami, parents on a farm in upstate New York. We know everything, Dominic. If you hurt her, we're not going to hurt anyone, as long as you cooperate." Robert placed a typed confession on the table. "Sign this admitting that you always knew about your father's operations and that you continued to use the companies and to launder money. In exchange, Sarah and the baby are safe." Dominic read the document. It was a complete confession that would condemn him to life imprisonment. "And if I don't sign? Then Sarah will discover some inconvenient truths about the man she loves." At that moment, Munoz entered the room with a somber expression. "Albright, I need to inform you that your partner had complications during childbirth. She's in the ICU in critical condition." The world collapsed. Dominic stood up abruptly. "I need to go to the hospital." "You're not going anywhere until you sign this confession," Robert said, "unless you want Sarah to discover when she wakes up that the man she loves killed her own sister." "I didn't kill Carol." "No, but your father did, and you knew." Robert placed another envelope on the table. "These are copies of the letters that Carol wrote to you before she died, telling you about the blackmail. Letters that arrived at your house that you read and ignored. Sarah will receive copies in the ICU, along with proof that you always knew she was in danger for being with you." The blackmail was perfect. Dominic could try to prove his innocence, but that would mean exposing Sarah to the most sordid truths about his family. And in her fragile state, the shock could kill her. 2 hours later, the headlines were already circulating. Tycoon confesses father's crimes and admits participation in scheme. Dominic's signature was authenticated. The confession was official. In the hospital, Sarah woke up alone in the ICU, not knowing if the baby had survived, with no news of Dominic, and with a nurse handing her an envelope that would change everything. Carol's letters were all there. Each word revealed that Dominic had always known the dangers, that he had brought her into his life knowing that she could die, just as his sister died. There was even a photo of her entering the shelter for single mothers, taken days before the reunion, proof that he was watching her, that nothing had been a coincidence. When Agent Munoz arrived to interrogate her about possible complicity, Sarah was crying silently. Not for the accusations against her, but for the discovery that the man she had learned to love again had orchestrated everything from the beginning. "Ms. Walker," Munoz said gently, "I need to ask, were you aware of Mr. Albright's criminal activities?" Sarah looked out the hospital window, seeing the reporters crowding outside. Within a few hours, her story would be told in the newspapers. The woman the criminal tycoon deceived, the single mother manipulated. "No," she replied in a firm voice. "I didn't know anything, just as I didn't know he was using me from day one." In prison, Dominic received a single message from Sarah through the lawyer. "The baby survived. Don't try to find us. For us, you died today." It was exactly what Robert wanted. Dominic destroyed, isolated, with nothing to protect. And Sarah free to disappear with the baby, taking with her the last piece of his heart that still worked. 6 months later, Sarah was living in a small rented house in Ithaca, New York, with her daughter, Elizabeth. The name chosen in a bitter irony of fate. The girl had been born healthy, despite all the complications, and Sarah worked as a freelance translator to support them. Life was simple, but dignified. Sarah had flatly refused to accept any type of alimony or financial assistance related to Dominic. She wanted to build a clean life for her daughter, away from the scandals and the pain. But the nights were difficult. When Elizabeth slept, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the inconsistencies that bothered her. Why had Dominic confessed so quickly? Why had he, who had always fought for everything in life, surrendered without resistance? And mainly, why did? Carol's letters seemed to have been written by someone who knew intimate details about her relationship with Dominic. It was on a Tuesday afternoon that everything started to change. Sarah was in the park with Elizabeth when an elegant woman of about 50 approached. "Sarah Walker?" The woman was well-dressed, grey hair styled with sophistication. But there was something familiar in her eyes. "Yes, who are you?" "My name is Beatrice Albright. I was married to Edward, Dominic's father." The woman sat on the bench next to her. "And Carol's sister." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What do you want?" "The truth, just like you." Beatrice watched Elizabeth sleeping in the stroller. "This child is very similar to Dominic as a baby. She's not his daughter. I know, but he loves her as if she were, doesn't he?" Beatrice smiled sadly. "Just as he has loved you all these years." Sarah didn't answer, but Beatrice continued. "Do you really believe that my stepson orchestrated an elaborate plan to manipulate you? The man who donated half of his fortune to charity in the last 5 years, who never got involved with another woman after you left his life." The evidence was planted. Beatrice opened a folder. "I've spent months investigating, hired private detectives, turned over every document. Carol never wrote those letters, Sarah. She died 3 weeks before the date she supposedly sent them." Sarah took the documents with trembling hands. Handwriting reports, forensic analyses, medical reports, everything pointed to forgery. "Robert Vasco has a sister named Carla who works in a printing shop specializing in reproducing historical documents," Beatrice continued. She was paid to forge Carol's handwriting. I have the bank transfers. But why are you telling me this? Why didn't you go directly to the police? Beatrice looked at Elizabeth. Because you are the only person in the world who can save my stepson. Dominic sacrificed himself to protect you two, but now he is in a federal prison awaiting trial. The lawyers say he could get 20 years. I don't understand. If there is evidence that he is innocent, the evidence I have is not enough to completely exonerate him, only to create reasonable doubt. Beatrice leaned forward. But I discovered something else. Robert didn't act alone. There is someone within the FBI itself who is sabotaging the investigation. Sarah felt her head spin. Who? Agent Munoz. He received $2 million in an offshore account 2 days before the operation. And there's more. The real boss of the Mexico group is Albert Miller. Miller? The name hit Sarah like lightning. Ryan Miller, Elizabeth's father, is his son. Albert used Ryan to get close to you, knowing that you were Dominic's weakness. When Ryan found out you were pregnant, he told his father, who saw a perfect opportunity for blackmail. The revelation was devastating. Sarah had been a pawn in a cruel game from the start, manipulated by men who saw her love as a weakness to be exploited. What do you want me to do? Sarah asked, her voice firm despite the tears. I want you to go to Robert. He doesn't know you discovered the truth. Pretend you want to make a deal with him. Information about Dominic in exchange. For money. Record everything. Beatrice handed her a small device. It's our only chance to get a confession. This is dangerous. If they find out, Sarah, Dominic gave up everything for you two. His freedom, his company, his reputation. He accepted being called a criminal so that you could live in peace. Beatrice touched her arm gently. The question is, how far are you willing to go to save him? Sarah looked at Elizabeth, thinking about her daughter growing up without knowing the truth about the man who had loved her even before she was born. She thought about Dominic in a cold cell, paying for crimes he didn't commit, accepting being destroyed to protect them. I'll do it, she said finally, but I'll need more than a recorder. If I'm going to enter the lion's den, I need to be prepared for war. Beatrice smiled for the first time. Then you better know that Robert is expecting you to contact him. He thinks you're desperate for money to raise your daughter alone. How does he know that? Because he's been monitoring you for months, Sarah. They know where you live, where you work. When you take Elizabeth to the pediatrician, they're waiting for the right moment to strike the final blow. Sarah felt a chill down her spine, but also a determination she hadn't felt in months. Then let's give them exactly what they're waiting for. That night, Sarah made the call that would change everything. Robert, this is Sarah Walker. I think we need to talk. The meeting was scheduled for the restaurant of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, a public and sophisticated location where Robert would feel safe. Sarah arrived punctually at 8 in the evening, wearing a simple but elegant black dress that Beatrice had lent her. The recorder was hidden in her purse, and she had rehearsed every word. Robert was waiting for her at a reserved table, smiling with the confidence of someone who believed they had won. Sarah, you look beautiful. Motherhood suits you. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Sarah sat down, feigning nervousness. I'm in a very difficult financial situation, I imagine. Raising a daughter alone must not be easy. Robert cut. A piece of salmon, especially when the child's father disappeared and the stepfather is in prison. That's what I want to talk about. I know things about Dominic, things that might interest you. Robert's eyes gleamed. What kind of things? He told me about secret accounts abroad, account numbers, passwords. Sarah opened her purse, making sure the recorder was working. He said that if something happened, I should use this information to protect myself. And why would you tell me this? Because I need money, Robert, and because I'm angry. Sarah let real tears well up. He used me, made me believe he loved me, and then I found out that everything was manipulation from day one. Robert leaned uninterestedly. Go on. He knew I was in the shelter. It wasn't a coincidence. Dominic looked for me because he needed a facade, someone to make him look more human in the face of the investigation that was already being prepared. Sarah controlled her breathing. But he made a mistake. He told me about other operations that you haven't discovered yet. What operations? Shell companies in Colombia, partnerships with Venezuelan cartels. Sarah was improvising but saw the genuine interest in his eyes. He said that if something happened to him, I should look for his partner Eduardo Santos in Caracas. Eduardo Santos died 5 years ago, Robert said automatically, then realized he had revealed too much knowledge. So you really work with them? Sarah feigned surprise. Dominic was right. He said there was an informant in the company. Robert laughed, completely relaxing. Dominic was always smart, but not smart enough. Yes, Sarah, I've worked for the Santos organization for 15 years. And yes, this whole scheme was created to destroy him. Why? What did he do? Nothing. But his father owed us a lot of money. Edward Albright died before paying off the debts, and we are not an organization that forgives debts. Robert took a sip of wine. When we couldn't recover the money, we decided to take control of the companies. Dominic was just an obstacle. And Carol, did she really try to blackmail you? Carol was an idealistic little girl who discovered things she shouldn't. She never tried to blackmail us, just threatened to expose everything. Her own father asked us to solve the problem. The coldness in Robert's voice was shocking. The car accident was convincing. Sarah felt nauseous, but continued. And the letters she supposedly wrote to Dominic? A masterpiece from my team. Dominic really believed he had failed to protect his sister. Guilt ate him up inside all these years. Robert leaned in conspiratorially. You know what was the most delicious part? He sacrificed himself for you believing he was repeating the mistake he made with Carol. He never suspected that I was just using you to destroy him. The recorder captured every word. Sarah had everything she needed. And now? She asked. Now, you give me this information about the offshore accounts, I pay you $2 million, and you disappear with your daughter. Simple. And Dominic? Dominic will spend the next 20 years in prison thinking he lost the only woman he loved because he couldn't protect her. Robert smiled cruelly. Poetic justice, don't you think? Sarah closed her purse and stood up. You know, Robert, you're right about one thing. Dominic really couldn't protect me. Exactly. So we have a deal? No. Sarah smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. Because he didn't need to protect me. I can protect myself. It was then that the restaurant doors opened, and a dozen federal agents entered. Not the same corrupt agents from 6 months ago, but a special team from Washington, D.C. that Beatrice had contacted through her own political contacts. Robert Vasco, Federal Agent August Lima announced, you are under arrest for racketeering, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit homicide. Robert's face paled. This is a misunderstanding. No, it's not. Sarah pulled the recorder from her purse. Our entire conversation was recorded, including your confession about the murder of Carol Albright. A week later, Dominic was released with all charges dropped. The evidence collected by Sarah and Beatrice, along with the clean federal investigation, had exposed the entire conspiracy. Robert Munoz and 15 other members of the Santos organization were arrested. Dominic left prison on a sunny December morning, but instead of going home, drove directly to Ithaca. He found Sarah in the backyard of the small house, hanging, baby clothes on the clothesline, while Elizabeth slept in a lawn chair in the shade. She saw him arriving and stopped, a piece of clothing still in her hand. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," she replied, not moving from the spot. They looked at each other across the sunny backyard, 6 months of pain and separation between them. Elizabeth woke up and started to cry, breaking the moment. Sarah picked up her daughter, and Dominic saw the baby for the first time since birth. Elizabeth had dark hair and big eyes, and when she stopped crying to observe the stranger, something broke and healed simultaneously in his heart. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's my life," Sarah replied, caressing her daughter's hair. "Sarah, I know that you saved me. Beatrice told me everything. How you risked your life to get that confession. How you fought for the truth when I had already given up." Dominic took a step towards her. "You are the bravest woman I know." "I didn't do it for you, Dominic. I did it for my daughter. She deserves to grow up knowing that the man who loved her first wasn't a criminal." The answer hurt, but he understood. "And now, what happens to us?" Sarah looked at Elizabeth, then at him. "Now you go back to your life, and I continue building mine. What if I don't want to go back to my old life? What if I want to build a new life with you too?" "Dominic, I know I don't have the right to ask this. I know I hurt you in a way that may never completely heal." He knelt on the ground of the backyard, right there among the basil plants and the clothes on the line. "But I love you, Sarah. I've loved you for 15 years, and I love this girl as if she were my daughter. Not out of gratitude, not out of guilt, but because you two became my family the moment I thought I had lost everything." Sarah watched him, tears streaming down her face. Elizabeth reached out her little hand towards Dominic, as if she recognized him. "Sarah Walker." Dominic took a simple ring from his pocket. Not an extravagant diamond, but a delicate and timeless solitaire. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be the father Elizabeth deserves? Will you give me the chance to spend the rest of my life proving that love can overcome any storm?" Sarah looked at the man kneeling in her simple backyard, the tycoon who had lost everything to protect her, who was now asking her to marry him without an empire, without a mansion, just with his heart in his hands. "Get up, Dominic," she said softly. He obeyed, uncertain. Sarah approached and placed Elizabeth in his arms. The girl snuggled against his chest immediately, as if it were the most natural place in the world. "Yes," she whispered, reaching out to receive the ring. "Yes, I accept. I accept marrying you. I accept letting you be her father. I accept building a family based on truth, not on secrets." The kiss that followed was sweet and salty with tears, 15 years of pain finally giving way to hope. Elizabeth giggled between them, as if she understood that she finally had a complete family. 3 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony in the garden of their new house in Ithaca, a modest property where Dominic had chosen to start over. The company had been sold, the money distributed among social projects, and the new life they were building together. At the makeshift altar among the rose bushes, with Elizabeth in his arms and Sarah radiant at his side, Dominic finally understood that sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what really matters. Love had won not despite the storm, but through it, and for the first time in 15 years, the future seemed infinite with possibilities.